Hey, good morning. It's Pastor Jeff with your Sunday morning message from here at Freedom Church. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. Right now, you are sitting on a large ball that is spinning around its axis at close to 1,000 miles per hour. The Earth will make one full rotation in the next 24 hours, and in addition to that, you are currently hurling through space at about 77,000 miles per hour. And in the last 365 days, you will have traveled 1.3 million miles around the sun. When is the last time you thought about any of that? Was the last time you thanked God that He is the one in control of those things and not you? You see, we don't celebrate any of these things simply because we don't celebrate constants. We take things that are constant and consistent for granted. Take the time today to thank God for the constants in your life, for the people who are consistently making you better, who are consistently making life better, who are consistently pointing you to Jesus. Thank God for the people who are your salt and your light on the days that you need it the most. We just got through doing a study on the Beatitudes, and right after the Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount from Jesus, there is a reference to us being the salt and the light of the world. And I find that interesting. If we're to be the light, we have to be powered by the actual source of the light. And here's those verses from Matthew 5:13-16. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all the house. In the same way, let your light shine, therefore, before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to God, your Father who is in heaven. Why do we want people to see our good works? So they will give glory to God. Why do we do good works? Mostly so that people will give glory to us. Salt. Let's start with salt. What happens if it loses its flavor? What do you have? If salt loses its flavor, you now have sand. And if you have ever eaten a sandwich or a snack of any kind at the beach on a windy day, you've ended up with sand in your food. And sand destroys the food. It doesn't have any taste. It just makes it less good, less wholesome. Salt without any flavor is just sand. And when do you notice salt the most? There are two times where you notice salt the most. One is when there isn't any salt. When something isn't salted and you know that it needs to be salted, you immediately notice that. You take note of that. And secondly, when there's too much salt. When something is too salty. When there isn't any salt and it needs to be salted, and when there's way too much salt. Those are when you make the notice of salt. Salt is that flavoring that's there, and if it's used correctly, it's just there. It doesn't make a huge splash. That's what I love about this reference by Jesus. You are called to be the salt of the earth. Like this old quote by Dwight Moody, the Christian shoemaker does his diligence not by putting little crosses on every shoe, but by making great shoes. You let the light of God shine through you. You become the salt of the earth just by being and doing your best and giving all you have to what you do. Everyone has something that they are great at. In most rooms, there are great first responders, great mechanics, landscapers, candle makers, teachers, military personnel, contractors, builders, students, athletes, leaders, moms, dads, sons and daughters. You're the salt of the earth by just being the best you. Also, in biblical times, do you know what the purpose of salt was? Do you know what it was used for? It was used to prevent decay of foods. They didn't have refrigerators. They didn't put stuff in the freezer or the fridge. They poured salt on it to preserve As Christians, our job is to remain salty, to add flavor when needed, but most importantly, is to prevent decay and to preserve the good that there is in this world. We're called to be the salt of the earth. We are called to preserve this world. We are called to have those same characteristics as salt. If we were teens, we would say, you're doing too much. It's going to show up if there's too much. And if we're not present as Christians, it's going to be obvious that we're needed. We're not meant to stand on the street corners and shout. We aren't meant to fight every fight. The people who fight every fight, who fight every political fight, who get entrenched and involved in every battle, many times it's because they don't have a strong understanding of heaven or salvation or of God. So they fight every single battle because they have to make this world as perfect as possible, because they believe that this world is all that there is. As believers, we live and long for a day when we are in heaven for eternity with God. And this home, this earth, and our earthly bodies, they're just temporary homes for us. Also, in biblical times, one thing that's overlooked with salt, if an army wanted to destroy its enemy, they would burn their villages and burn and tear down all of the buildings and structures. And then, to prevent them from being able to bounce back from the destruction, they would pour salt all over their crops and stomp it into the ground so that nothing would ever grow there again. So as a believer, if you aren't being used by God, you will be used by the world. And believe me, there's a lot of that going. There are pastors standing on platforms saying things, being used by the world instead of being beacons of hope and of light for God. And we are light. Our light can only be snubbed out by us. Not the world, not by others, but by us allowing it to be. If you watch the world we live in today, there is a lot of what we call virtue signaling. If you go to the gym and work out and you don't take a selfie or a mirror picture, does that workout even count? If you do some great act of generosity or serve in some way in your community and you don't capture it with a picture or a video or share on social media, did you even accomplish anything? Did you make a difference? That's what we think. And that's how we act. You know, love God, love people, and then take a picture of whatever it is you're doing. Blessed to be able to do this. Take a picture of what you're doing. We're to be the salt and the light of the earth so that people will see our good works and glorify God in them, not us. Virtue signaling is nothing new. We all have a desire to display our goodness to others. But that longing, it leads to a performance-based life, and it will corrode us from the inside out. And we can try to blame it on social media if we want to, but the truth is, social media didn't cause it. It revealed it. I went to a meeting just this past week with a few coworkers, and one of them said, "Good grief, Jeff, you know everyone everywhere." Truth is, it probably looks that way, but it doesn't feel that way to me. Because deep down, we all want to feel like the song from that old sitcom Cheers. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad that you came. We want to belong. We want to shine. We want to outshine at times. Think about your phone. Every time you get a notification of some sort, dopamine is released in our brains. Even if it's negative, receiving that notification means one of our deepest needs is met, and that we are known, we are acknowledged, and we are seen. On this phone that I'm videoing with right now, I only have text messages and phone calls turned on. And honestly, I'm on call for a lot of people. So there are times where I read it, but I don't respond for a while because I just don't want that notification sitting there. I look at teens' phones and I see they have every snap sent in Snapchat, every like or comment on their social media, and every interaction sending them notifications. It would be exhausting to do that. So I have it all turned off, except for phone calls and text messages. And a lot of times I'll get a message in Messenger or an email or something like that, and I will just click on it and open it so that I don't have that notification sitting there with that little number on my phone. Matthew 6:1-4, beware of practicing your righteousness before others in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. So this goes hand in hand with being the salt of the earth. It is needed, but if we overdo it, it's no good. And if it's missing, it definitely leaves a lot to be desired. This is why at Freedom, I did away with passing offering plates. I chose a box for our tithes and offerings in the back of the room. What you give, when you give, and how you give is 100% between you and God. I don't want anyone to give because people are watching. I don't want anyone to give because they feel pressured. I want you to give because it's the right thing to do, because it's what God's calling you to do. And giving will build trust in God. When we give, we are giving away money to be used by the church, to be used by God. And we're saying, God, I trust you that I'm still going to be able to pay my bills even though I gave you this money. Now, a little deeper into the light side of things. John 1:4-5, in him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but that darkness has not understood it. The meaning of these verses is that evil never has and never will overcome or distinguish God's light. I want you to think about it this way. There is no such thing as cold. Cold does not exist. Cold is the absence of heat. There is no such thing as darkness. Darkness is the absence of light. With that analogy in mind, think about the people around you in your life who are not believers. What is their greatest problem? Their problem is not darkness. It's an absence of light. It's an absence of good in their lives. So we all go through these periods of depression. And I read the other day in an email from churchleaders.com that 60% of pastors were either completely frustrated or depressed. Pastors need therapists too. I'm not in this boat, but I have my bouts with it from time to time. Jesus' positioning when he spoke these words is almost as important as his words are, because he is standing in the area where the offerings were placed. Right where he stood when he said, don't give your gifts so that others will see it. Right where he stood, there were candles placed that burned all throughout the day, signifying the days when the pillar of fire had guided them in the darkness. And that symbol of fire was the great light. The only light greater than fire in those days was the sun. They didn't have electricity. So fire was a huge symbol of God's presence, his power, his guidance in the lives of his followers. Much the same things that Jesus stood for. He was a symbol of God's presence, his power and guidance in the human form. I want you to think for just a minute as we close this time out. I want to give you an illustration, a story from my life. For some reason, teenagers really like to play manhunt and capture the flag. Play a lot of it in the youth ministry years that I've done here at Freedom. When I was at Ancient City Baptist Church, we played manhunt through an entire 3-story building and 2-story building, all connected. Had a blast doing it. But when I was a teenager, one time, our youth pastor got the bright idea to do it in the woods and at night. We were pumped for this, and we were so excited about it. And we got there, and he walked us all through the area and showed us how it was marked off and how the trails looked. But he did this in daylight. Then we went over and we had dinner. We played football. We played games. We had fun. Then he walked over and said, everybody gather up. And he got a megaphone. He brought us all together and he started explaining the rules and reminding us how the trails were marked. And he said, are you guys ready? And of course we screamed yes. But it dawned on me, none of us had brought flashlights. We didn't even notice our need for flashlights because we'd walk through the paths in the playing area while the sun was still out. So Todd gave out flashlights, just enough for each team to have 4. There were about 30 of us total. So we had to divide and conquer the flashlights. So we split up into groups. We had 2 teams. We split up into groups and he walked one group to the other side of the woods. One group stayed where they were, divided up the flashlights, sent us on our way. I got stuck in the group with the fast people. And we were sprinting through the woods like it was some kind of track meet. Keep in mind, my nickname in high school was Flash. I was not very fast at this time. And running and holding a flashlight is tough because the flashlight is all over the place and rarely on the path. And if the fastest person had the flashlight, which happened to be our situation, eventually you couldn't see where you were running because you were far too far from the light. Jesus says to us, follow me and you will never walk in darkness. He doesn't hand everyone a flashlight. He gives us opportunities to be light. And he gives light, the source of our light, to the people in our lives who can lead us closer to Jesus. He alone is the light. And if your life seems a little bit dark, it's either because you weren't following Jesus closely enough at all, or you aren't following the people around you who are being the light source closely enough to acknowledge that God is even working. Let's be the salt and let's be the light of this earth. And let's understand that in order to do that, we have to be close to the source and we have to remain to the source. And that source is God's own Son, Jesus Christ. Have a great day and God bless.